Hi there! So if you have painted with watercolor before and it has ever felt unpredictable or out of control, you're not doing anything wrong. Most beginners' frustration comes down to water control. It's not due to talent or material or brushes or paper, which essentially is material. In this video, I'll show you exactly how much water you will need for particularly watercolor flowers, and how to recognize when you have too much water or too little water and how to fix it. By the end of this lesson, watercolor will feel much more manageable, slower and calmer to paint. I like to think of watercolor paper in three simple states. The first one is dry paper, and the paint stays exactly where you place it. Edges are crisp and controlled, and this is great for details, stems, and final touches. So let's do a quick demonstration. Let's take blue. It's exactly where it started, and nothing bleeds, nothing fades. Right? If we remember our circles, I can fill it in, and it stays exactly inside the line. Now, if we take our compound stroke, which we learned during last lesson, if you would like to have a look, I'll link the video below. Also here. The color doesn't fade, the color doesn't bleed, it doesn't bloom, everything stays basically where I applied the color. Then we have damp paper. That's the second state. And the surface has a very soft sheen, but no puddles of water. And the paint spreads gently and creates soft floral edges. This is where most loose florals live, essentially. To do this, I'm gonna wet the brush, go across my paper, work it in. And then now, as you can see, it spreads a bit. Let's say if we wanted to do some petals of a flower. You see the water moves a bit more. Here you can see when it dries, it spreads out slightly and it becomes a bit more natural. This is also great if you want to paint water, skies, etc. Because then you can create you can see it spreads out, and you can create a great color cross that fades smoothly. Let's do another round because we have space. Here we're also talking about I'm going to demonstrate this. Maybe that becomes more clear if we do. Here you can see the wet paper. This is basically when you have puddles or a very strong shine on the paper. It helps if you look on it from the side when you have the light, so you see how much water is on the paper. And here you can see that the paint spreads quickly, much faster compared to here when it dries, right? You see here it just bleeds out on the corners, versus here it went much quicker and it does it unpredictably. You have no idea how far it spreads, where it spreads. Now, here now we've waited for a second and it's again damp. We will see that this will dry differently. So this is very expressive, but it's rather tricky when you want to start at the beginner's level. This is nice if, like this, for example, could be cornflowers, but it's more difficult to control. So this is, if you put a dot, maybe if you want to try it, you put dots and you see how it spreads and then you can create flowers out of it. But this is maybe a bit more if you want to do a mixed approach. So now if you would outline this with black pen, for example, you create the outlines of the flower throughout. So you imagine it as a second step. But if you want to go just with watercolor, this is probably not the right start for a beginner level. And ideally, when we are talking about florals, which we're focusing on, you want to go in the direction of damp paper, because this creates very natural looking flowers and petals mainly. And then if you want to go for detail in stems, etc., you want to go for the dry paper. Now, let's look at the brush itself, because obviously you can load the top of your brush as well. So this has an impact on what will happen on paper. A good rule of thumb is that your brush should be juicy, but not dripping. There shouldn't be dripping water. Maybe you can see it is quite loaded with water. It is shiny, but it doesn't drip. So the way that I usually do it, I go into the water, I go into my paint, and then I go onto my paper to remove any excess water. Now, let's compare. Let's assume I go into the water, I go into the paint. This is a lot of water now in the paint, and we're overloading. Now, let's assume we overload. That is basically dripping. We will see how this will dry out. Another one. Maybe we do circles. Explain you the circles. Maybe this is helpful. Okay. Now, let's take a too dry brush. Dip it into water. Put color. Put it on the thing. And we try to do a circle. You see what happens? It's tricky and it's uneven. If I want to do a stroke, it's basically impossible. If I would add a bit of color onto my brush, we see what happens, right? And this is also how you can fix it. Now, coming to a balance brush. So I dip it into water, I go into my paint, and I tap it on my paper towel. And we do a circle. Now we just need to wait for it to dry. So this is something you will learn with time, and that's completely fine. Now let's look at some of the common beginner problems and fixes. Now, if your paint spreads too much, basically to recap, and what are the common problems and fixes? If your paint spreads too much, that is for two reasons. Either your paper is too wet or your brush has too much water. So it's basically an excess of water. Then if your paint looks dull or dry, you need to add a little more water or slow down and reload your brush with water. Watercolor is a conversation. You need to pause, observe, and then continue. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week.